Before we kick this episode off, I just wanted to make one special announcement. We have officially partnered with Mountain Tough Fitness to bring you a great option when it comes to your overall fitness and wellness goals. It's perfect timing as we're coming into the last few weeks and months before hunting seasons to take one more deep dive into your fitness routine and make sure you are at your best come fall. Mountain Tough has programs for everyone. Whether you work out at home without any equipment or you have access to a full gym, Mountain Tough has a program for you. Abby and I have been using it these last few weeks since we had Weston on the podcast, and we've really been liking the mobility work that the Mountain Tough app has in it. You've heard us talk on the podcast many times about the importance of fitness and being at your best. Well, Mountain Tough is a great option no matter where you're at in your journey. Whether you're new to fitness or you've been a lifetime athlete, Mountain Tough has programming and resources to help you. And if you use the code ROOKIE, they are going to give you the first month free when you sign up. So go check out the link below in the show notes, use the code ROOKIE, and get yourself ready for some amazing adventures out on the mountains this fall.
You're listening to The Western Rookie, a hunting podcast full of tips, tricks, and strategies from seasoned Western hunters. There are plenty of opportunities out there. We just need to learn how to take on the challenges.
Hunting is completely different up there.
I've harvested 26 big game animals.
You can fool their eyes, but you can't fool their nose.
300 yards back to the road turned into 3 miles back the other way.
It's always cool seeing new hunters go and harvest an animal.
I don't know what to expect.
If there's anybody I want in the woods with me, it'll be you.
Welcome back to another Western Rookie podcast brought to you by GOHUNT. We've got a really cool episode. We have a listener actually wrote in with an awesome question, so we got him on the pod today. But before we kick this episode off, if you're listening to this and you're getting value out of the Western Rookie, you know the whole mission of the podcast is to help more people hunt the West, learn all the tips and tricks, and if that's you, or if you especially know somebody in your life that would also love to hunt the West, please share the podcast with them. Let's help more people understand, the gear, the point systems. We're getting a lot of questions on that. And we actually had 2 questions on point systems since the last podcast. So we're going to kick this episode off. We've got Silas Morris on the pod today. Silas wrote in with a super cool question, not the point system question. So we're going to cover both questions in today's podcast. But before we do that, how are you doing tonight, Silas?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, thanks for writing in. So you had a really good question, and I want to build a little suspense, and we're gonna tease the listeners a little bit, and we're gonna save your question for the meat of the podcast. We're going to come in with a little appetizer here.
Okay.
I've recently been a person that likes to order like a side salad to come out first. And so we're going to start here with like a little Caesar salad. We've had 2 people write in and say, hey, can you explain point systems? I get confused about the point systems. I don't know where do I start? Is there point systems that you recommend beginning with? It's a great topic. I don't know, Silas, are you building points across the West in any states?
I am. I have Montana, Wyoming. Both of those are for elk. Montana's elk and deer, and then Wyoming's elk, deer, and antelope. And
okay.
New Mexico as well, and then just Colorado, home state.
Okay. So you just apply for New Mexico, like swing for the fences, since they don't have a point system? Yeah. Okay. All right. So you actually have what I would say is like the starter pack, right? The of points. And so what I mean by that is Montana, Wyoming, Colorado, I think is a great starter pack for anyone out there.
Yep.
And it also basically covers the core, I would say, of the non-resident elk hunting states. There's others for sure. We mentioned it, New Mexico. There's always Idaho, Oregon, Washington, Nevada. But some of these, Arizona, some of these other states, they're starting to be like next. Like that's when you're really pursuing a long-term strategy.
Yeah.
Wyoming, Montana, Colorado, so far can get you elk hunting every year. If you build points in those 3 states and you're open to doing over-the-counter Colorado as needed, as available, there's changing some laws around that, you should be able to elk hunt every year. And so it also covers 3 drastically different point systems. And so that's what I think most people are like, it seems like the little research I do, every point system's different. I don't know, do I need a point? Do I need a bonus point? Do I need a preference point? How many points do I need? So we'll start with Colorado because it's the simplest point system that exists. Colorado, straight preference point system, right, Silas? So you build a point, you have, so many, every year you don't draw a tag, you can apply for a point. Colorado, you have to apply in the beginning of the year during the normal application season. But the way they give out tags, so if there's, for example, there's one tag for a unit, both Silas and I are applying for it, right? They're going to give the tag to whoever has most points. So if Silas has 5 points, I have 4 points, he's going to get the tag. And then when it gets to me, there's none left. So I don't get anything. And that's the same whether there's 1 or 100. In our true preference point system like Colorado, whoever has the most points, they start at the top and they say who's got the most points that applied for unit 900. And they'll give that one out, and then they just go right down the list. And somewhere they probably will run out. There's a couple units they don't, but usually they run out. And then, if they run out in the 3-point bracket, that's usually called like a 4-point unit then, right? Or a 3-point, depending on how you call it, right? That's true preference. So now we'll go to Wyoming. Wyoming is technically a preference point system, but they throw in a couple kickers.
Yeah.
Wyoming, you build a point, they do the draw, but they take all of the tags and say there's 100 tags for a unit Silas and I are putting in for, and we both, let's say, have 2 points, and we're putting in for a general elk tag. They'll take 25% of those tags, and they put it over in here in a side pot, and they will do a complete random draw. They don't even look at our points. Everyone just gets a random lottery number, and they draw for those 25%. And when that's done, then they take the 75% that are remaining, and they do the standard preference point system. And anyone that already drew a tag in the random, that you're out. And they'll go right down the list just like Colorado. And so that's the little kicker. So like lately, a general elk tag, you need about 4 points in Wyoming to guarantee it. And so if Silas and I both have 2 points, he might draw. There's about a 14% chance you'll draw in the random. So he might draw with 2 points, and then I don't get anything with 2 points because I didn't draw in the random, and I didn't have the 4 points it needs to draw the tag as a preference.
Sure.
So that's the Wyoming system. Montana, most complicated one of the three. They have both. They have a preference point system and a bonus point system. So the preference point system, it acts just like there is a random allocation for 0 point holders, which is kind of like Wyoming's random allocation, but then in Wyoming, everyone's included in the random draw.
Sure.
In Montana, only 0 point holders are included in the random draw. So if you built a point last year, you don't even get to participate in the random draw. The preference points are what draws your general tag, your harvest tag, your carcass tag. Those are your preference points. I think you can only have 2 or 3. I can't remember what the limit is, but they don't let you build those forever because they're general tags. They only take 2 to draw. 2 is guaranteed, 1 is not, 0 is not. It's kind of a goofy system. But then they have a bonus point system, and that's if you want to draw a limited entry permit, which is a limited entry unit that allows you to use your general tag in another special unit. You still have to draw your general, then you can move on to try to draw a limited entry permit with your bonus points. If you don't draw your general, you don't get to draw a permit. If you do draw your general, but you don't draw your permit, then you have the option to return your general tag, and then there's like a second round. It's very confusing, but that basically covers most bonus point systems. The only one that we haven't really covered is a true preference point system, or a true bonus point system.
Yeah.
Usually bonus point systems are they'll take the number of points you have and either square them or cube them. So if I have 5, that might go into the draw as 125 lottery tickets, and then they draw. So it's kind of, no one ever is guaranteed, but no one's ever out of the race. And so Utah does that. Montana does that for limited entry. North Dakota does that. I think there's a couple other states, but that's the core of elk hunting for non-resident: Montana, Wyoming, Colorado. And that's how each of their point systems work. So it's confusing. I get why people write in. I don't know if you had the same experience when you were learning, Silas, on like, I don't know, I just buy them now and I'll figure out how to use them later.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it went. I just found myself wanting to get more elk hunting experiences, and got into it, and it was definitely a jumbled mess. And then through listening to your podcast, I want to say it was maybe, I don't know, 6-7 months ago. I was like, man, maybe I should check out this GOHUNT thing, see what all the hype's about. And ever since getting GOHUNT, it is just tenfold helped applying for different states, understanding what you can do, what you can't do. So I really do think that makes it easier, but you have to pay attention. I mean, almost every draw system, you have to pay attention. And it has been easier. When I was growing up, they sent us paper applications. So if you chicken scratch for handwriting, you probably weren't getting a tag that year, So it's a lot easier being able to do it online, but you have to know what you're doing.
You have to know what you're doing. You have to know when the deadlines are. You have to know, like, for example, Colorado, you have to buy your point as an app in the app season. So I think it's like April 1st or April 15th. We do a bonus episode every year. But Wyoming, you can buy your point in the fall. And Montana, you can buy your points in the fall. And so sometimes people get to the fall and they're like, I'm ready to buy all my points. It's like, nope, you missed the deadline. Arizona, same way.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it is a learning curve, man. They don't make it easy. And I want the listeners to know, I only had to pay Silas $100 to say all those nice things about GOHUNT, our title sponsor. No, it truly is. I mean, I go out on a limb and say GOHUNT is probably on par with a quality pair of boots in terms of what can you spend your hard-earned money on to be more successful in the West. I mean, if you've got shit boots, you're good luck.
Yeah.
And if you've got a little bit more money, then get GOHUNT and then start looking at everything else. You can do a lot with a book bag. You can do you don't need a Mystery Ranch pack. You don't need a Kafaru pack. You don't need the latest and greatest Christensen Arms, breakdown rifle. You use your grandpa's 270. It's probably killed more elk than your new one ever will anyway. But knowing where to be and being able to get yourself there, boots and GOHUNT, it's crazy how valuable that is.
Yeah, I'd agree. I mean, I think especially for kind of your platform of getting people into the Western side of things, so much more land, I would say, as far as public land than the Midwest. When I go to Wisconsin, people are like, yeah, this is a big national forest here. And I'm just like, I mean, it is big. Don't get me wrong. But just nothing compared to the vast amount of land that you can get into in the West. And so I'm sure that can be very daunting for people. And so, I think you're doing a good thing by trying to get people, just some information. Like you said, getting GOHUNT is as good as a good pair of boots because, if you don't know where you're going, it doesn't matter. You can have the Christensen Arms, you can have the Crispies, you can have the latest, greatest tent, and you're never going to find much,
Yeah.
So, opportunities.
Yeah. You got to know where to go and you got to be able to get there. I mean, that's what it comes down to. And I love GOHUNT. One of the things I really love, especially checking out new units, GOHUNT's got layers of like summer range, winter range, all season range. And so it's like, if I'm going to a unit and I don't know, it's like, for perfect example, we're doing Wyoming antelope this year, me and my wife, Abby, and it's a new unit. And I'm like, this is an antelope unit, but the whole unit isn't an antelope unit. Like, I want to know where to focus. And they've got these layers I can turn on. Well, here's the summer range. I don't have to worry about the winter range. I mean, we're not going to be in winter. So I can look at the summer range and the all season range, and you can kind of see there's going to be like an overlay. And, the all season range and the summer range might be a little bit bigger, and then the all seasons maybe a subset. But then you're like, okay, now I know where to focus. I know where to start.
True.
There might not be an antelope right there, but at least I'm not way on the other side of the unit wasting time where they've never seen an antelope before. Right. And so I love that about the mapping, and you don't have to pay for 2 map services.
True. I think that's a key component there. And for me, like a lot of people will ask, hey, where did you archery hunt? I really want to do a rifle hunt, and I have to tell them, well, I don't know if that's going to play out for you. Like, where I'm bow hunting these elk and these deer is a lot higher elevation than your third season rifle hunt that you're trying to do. So I can't guarantee you they're going to be up there. I can tell you they're probably not, but so having that, like you said, you might be able to say, okay, and if I'm hunting later season, then maybe this is an opportunity where I should start looking at some of the lower drainages, some of the stuff that's at a lower elevation. If I have to go high, then so be it. But focusing and knowing where the animals may be and historically have been, I think is a great key to success.
Yeah. Yeah. So, that being said, I want to get to your question, and I want to spend that's I think the key part of this podcast will be kind of the topic that you introduced. Um, and so you reached out, you sent us a message, and once again, we've mentioned it multiple times. You probably heard me say it, and that's why you're like, oh, maybe I will send them a message. But feel free to reach out, folks, and ask questions. Like, if you don't want to come on the podcast to answer it, you don't have to. I mean, I texted Silas the answer, and then I said, hey, by the way, can I share your question on the air? And I think we covered it
Yep.
in a bonus episode. But it's a good topic. I think it's really relatable. And so the heart of your question was, hey, I've got a rifle set up, and I'm a whitetail hunter. I also want to Western hunt. I want to get into all these other things. Like, what do you think on, do I need to switch into a different caliber? Is this caliber fine? Do I need to switch bullets? I'm hunting like drastically different types of, environments, habitats, species, states. I mean, everything. And so I think it's a good topic that I want to dive into more, but break it down for the listeners, like what you asked, like, paint the picture for us.
Definitely. So mainly, growing up, I've killed elk and deer with the 270, but for the most part, I've used the same Remington 30-06. And growing up in Colorado, I always shot anywhere from 170 to 200 grains out of it, and I seem to think that was what would be perfect for elk hunting and deer hunting. And then I met my wife, started going out to Wisconsin where she's from. And, there are some big bodied whitetail deer, but I started looking at most of it and thinking, man, I don't know if the higher grain bullets is the way to go if I'm going to have to transition. And so maybe my question to you was, do you think I should do two rifles? Should I have a different setup for going to the Midwest versus my rifle setup for the West? Obviously, mule deer, whitetail deer, antelope, most of those same calibers, no matter where you're at, is probably going to work well, right? It's when you start jumping up to some of the elk, moose, things like that maybe will throw a little bit of a wrench in there. So yeah, basically, I just, I don't know if 179 grain, Hornady ELDX is too much for whitetail hunting.
Yeah.
When I used it, I didn't put it through both shoulders, but I mean, it definitely dropped him right where he stood. And that's what everybody wants, right? My main reason for switching to a better bullet is I grew up shooting Remington Corlocks.
Yeah.
Big lead insert in there. But they were cheap, they were affordable. And when I was a kid, my dad was just like, we need to get you something that's not going to break the bank because you keep, and so I just kept shooting those. But first whitetail I killed in Wisconsin, same thing, shot it and it bounced just off the front shoulder. A lot of it splintered through the heart. Found it in the rear right quarter, probably 3 or 4 big chunks of lead. And kind of as you got to in the podcast, like you said, you can find some of them, but you might not find all of it. And so that's what kind of worried me was, am I sending this to the processor? Am I grinding it up and ingesting lead? Or even if not, if I'm bouncing off a bone and not getting great penetration, how successful is that going to make me down the road? So,
Yeah. Yeah, you had a lot of good. You got the question had a lot of great points and very relatable points. And I think another part of it was you were like, when I hunt in Wisconsin, like we're doing deer drives and stand hunting, and when we do a deer drive, it's usually quicker shots. Deer are moving. Obviously, if the deer stops, perfect, but I can't control that, and
Yeah.
I can't control I can't pick where the shot's going to be. Sometimes there is going to be brush. If it, obviously if it's too much brush, no shot, but there, is there going to be a twig in the way? And is a bullet going to perform better or worse than another one? And it's such a good question, because I think so many of us are in that position, especially I think the listeners of the podcast here. I would go out on a limb and say most of us are, whitetail hunters at heart. Like we grew up whitetail hunting, and then we started looking out west. And so I'm a strong proponent of hunt what you like, start where you're at, right? You use what you have, start with what you got. I only have one rifle. We're talking about this in the green screen. I own one rifle, folks. I have bought one. I have a 300 Win Mag. It's a max long range. It's a 12-pound rifle. It's got a huge optic on it. If I put a bipod on it, it turns into a 13-pound rifle. That's all I got. I mean, my grandpa passed, and I got a couple of his old guns in the safe, but none of them are they're memory pieces. They're sentimental firearms. One of them is a single shot rear loading 22 he found at the dump. One of them is a Sears catalog 270. I think he bought it in like the 50s. And one of them is a 300 Savage that doesn't have a clip anymore. So not a lot of options to go on an elk hunt, right? Having the right tool for the job can make all the difference in the world. And that applies for Western hunts too, especially if you're coming from the Midwest like myself. Because if you don't have it, there's no going home to get it. And that's why many of us Western hunters are also gear junkies. And the same is true for the folks over at GOHUNT. They have built the GOHUNT gear shop to be jam-packed full of the best, highest quality gear needed for your Western hunt. They try out everything that gets into the shop, and if they don't like it or they don't use it, it doesn't make the cut. So if you need something for your next trip, GOHUNT has something for you in the gear shop. They've got everything from optics, gear, camping accessories, apparel, footwear. They've got packs, and they've got some of the best brands in the industry. So if you're in the market for some new gear, consider checking out the GOHUNT gear shop. They're an avid supporter of the outdoors. They are supporters of this podcast, and most importantly, they're supporters of you. They want to help you be more successful in the West, so there's no better place to shop for gear, information, and knowledge than GOHUNT. And if you use the code WESTERN when you check out, you're going to get 10% off most of the regular priced items in the shop. So head over to GOHUNT.com, get the gear you need, use the code WESTERN, and get the right tool for the job this fall. So I use that for everything. And I picked the 300 Win Mag. I mean, I'm an engineer. You guys know I'm pretty analytical. And elk is the main thing. Like that, I needed an elk rifle. I got through a couple years of borrowing rifles, and then I'm like, all right, I got a big boy job. I got enough. I can go build my own rifle, but I can only do one. I mean, I could do more, but I'd choose not to. I'm buying farms and buying tractors, and that's a lot more expensive. So yeah. And so I'm like, I need an elk rifle, and I build the rifle for the species that's either one, you can go one or two ways. Either the main species that's in scope, right? Like what is this rifle going to be used for? Everything you could potentially use this rifle for, I kind of call that in scope. It's a term from work, but like this project's got a bunch of things that are in scope. For me, grizzly bears and brown bears, out of scope. I don't hunt those things, right? Muskox, don't have to worry about that. I'm not going to use this rifle for elephants, right? Could I go on a moose hunt? Sure, but it's not what I'm building this rifle for. If I'm ever going to do a moose hunt, I could do another rifle. Or what is a common thing that's the biggest, right? Like you're like, I do a little this, I do a little that. We do an antelope hunt every year. I'm mainly going to use it for whitetails in Wisconsin, but I might go elk hunting every 3 years or so. Well, then I might, still say like, what's the biggest animal that you're going to commonly hunt? Either way, in my case, it was elk. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going with 30 caliber. And then you just got to pick which 30 caliber resonates with you. I've shot 300 short mags. I've shot 30-06s. I don't own a 30-06. No one in my family does, but it is the OG rifle. And I just like the 300 Win for whatever reason. It's a common caliber. It's made it through the test of time. I was really looking forward to a 28 Nosler or a 30 Nosler, but when I bought my rifle, there was it was the middle of the ammo crisis, and it was a brand new caliber. So there's nothing.
Yeah, I think that happened to a lot of people where they were like, oh man, this 28 Nosler's coming out and it's awesome. And
it looked like the perfect gun.
Yeah. And then people bought it and then they complained about, I just can't find any ammo for it. And when you do, you don't want to sight the dang thing in and leave yourself
$120 a buck. Yeah. Yeah. It's expensive. And so that's what I did. And I think in your position, if you've got access to two guns, and if you want to, sure, go for it. But it's incremental. Like you're buying two different boxes of shells. You're spending twice as much time at the range. You got to sight them both in. You're burning twice as much ammo. Depending on what your scope, like what you use. Like I'm a big first focal plane guy. I'm a big dope chart dial And so it's like now I'm remembering multiple, dope charts and load data and drops. And if you want to do that, go for it, right? Like it would be sweet to have a gun to hunt antelope with that's not a 300 Win Mag, but I'm not there. So
Yeah.
with your question specifically, like I think a 30-06, it's the OG 30 caliber. It's the OG big Western gun. I would not change away from the caliber at all. I would feel zero drive to change away from the caliber. That being said, I do think if folks are listening to this and they are so torn on what gun to buy, they're like, well, I could go on an elk hunt, but realistically, like that's probably a 1 in 5 or 1 in 10 year thing. I'm going to deer hunt every year. I'm probably going to antelope hunt every 3 years. I think 270 Win Mag is the best caliber that you can buy for an all around gun. I don't think there's a better one out there. And I'm going to get so much hate from anyone that doesn't shoot a 270. I don't even shoot one, so don't hate me too hard. I just think like if you need to buy one gun that needs to do everything in the lower 48, it's hard to beat the 270 Win Mag.
I would agree with you 100%. Like I said, I grew up starting with the 270, and I still have yet to kill a bull elk, but I've killed 8 cows, and probably 5 of them were with a 270, 165 grain, and holy smokes, like it absolutely does work. And you can neck it up, you can neck it down for whatever you might be doing, but not too much kick. Really, really all around rifle. And like you said, everybody says a 30-06 is the way to go, and I'll have to back that up because I still shoot it. But man, the 270 is definitely a great entry round or rifle that can get you through a few different hunts through the West. So.
Oh yeah, it could be a lifetime gun. I mean, you can go down for antelope, you can go up to elk. Now I want to like mention a caliber, like maybe disclaimer, right? There are a lot of calibers that can do a lot of things, and if people research it. Like the famous question I would say right now, and I think it's starting to kind of start to wane, but the big question was, is the 6.5 Creedmoor an elk rifle? Right? It's been a huge forum topic. People are very passionate, depending on what side of the fence they're like, no, it's too small, it doesn't have the energy, it's not the size. And the other people are like, well, my wife shot a bull at 400 yards with it, so explain that. You know what I mean? A lot of rifles can do a lot of things, but they're not all equal, right? You cannot do everything with a 6.5 Creedmoor that like a 338 Lapua would do, right?
Sure.
Like you still have to look at ballistics and energy. Does that mean you can't go elk hunting with a 6.5 Creed? Sure, you can go, but you're not going to have the energy downrange at 700 yards that a 338 Lapua will have, or a 325 Winchester Short Mag. And you just have to know that. Yeah. It doesn't mean you can't go, just get in tighter, strive for that 250 yard shot or a 300 yard shot, instead of saying, oh, this, I see guys shoot elk all the time at 600 yards, so I'm going to do the same thing with my gun. You just got to make that decision. Eventually every rifle eventually loses its effective energy. Right.
Oh yeah.
And then you start getting into some really dangerous zones of like, does your bullet have enough energy to make up for a bad shot? Does it have enough energy to break a front shoulder? Does it have enough energy to get a pass through? And you don't want to be in that position.
No, that's the last thing you need to be thinking about when you're putting this, the crosshairs on an elk. And like I get it, the 6.5, a lot of people kill elk with it, and it definitely reaches out there. But I think that goes into kind of like you had explained with shot placement. I guess the benefit of shooting the 300 or the 338 Lapua is, like you said, if you're off and you hit the shoulder, you have enough energy to still do a lot of damage. And if you hit right where you want, it's great. And that's what the 6.5, you got to pay attention to the dope charts. You have to understand your max effective range, because those things are going to directly correlate. You might think you made a perfect shot and just be blood trailing for the next 3 miles and never get closer,
Right. Yeah, you don't want to be in a position where you're about to take this shot and you're saying, if everything goes right, this will work.
Oh, yeah.
I want to be in a position where I'm like, if almost everything goes wrong, this elk is still dead.
Yeah.
If I sneeze when the gun goes off, no matter if the wind gusts, like this shot is so tight. I mean, I have a 500-yard elk rifle.
Okay.
And I'm a 500-yard shooter. I'm not a 1,000-yard shooter. I know what my personal capabilities are. The rifle could be a 1,000-yard elk gun, but I'm not a 1,000-yard shooter. I still want a nice, crispy 55-yard shot.
Oh, who wouldn't?
I don't want to see the whole elk at minimum zoom on my scope. If that's the shot you give me, let's do it. Let's dump this thing at 55 yards. I want to be as close as possible, right? And so I'm always like, how can we get to the point where there's like 99.9% confidence? Literally, the number one thing that won't work is if the gun misfires. Like that,
Yeah.
at this point, that's all it's going to take,
Yeah.
right? And I just encourage people to like focus on that. Don't focus on what can I get away with. Focus on how can I make this an absolute slam dunk.
I would agree. I mean, I think there's a lot of people out there, like I said, that shoot the 6.5, but I think it was Eric Van Workum with Muley Freak, just getting so much backlash for killing his spring bear with a 22 Creedmoor. Everybody's like, there's no way, like that's, and he said the same thing. Yeah, I had to shoot it a couple times, but was very effective with it. I think he shot it out to like 550 or something. So it was like,
wow,
it's, it is crazy. I would never think about doing that. And Colorado has certain rules and restrictions that keep you from using, I think below, I can't remember, 28 caliber maybe. So it's like, there's something about it that's like, it definitely makes sense when you hit your spot and you hit your target. But with the 22 Creedmoor, or if you don't, what are the chances of losing animals? How many shots? Like you said, he had to hit it a couple times. So, I get it, but that's not just a 22 Creedmoor. That's people shooting high around
everything. What happens if I miss at 1,000 yards with my rifle and I hit a front shoulder? Like, am I going to have enough energy? I'll break the front shoulder, but is it just breaking a front shoulder on an elk doesn't get you anything? That elk's going to survive and die in the winter.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like you said, I mean, you might hit right where you want it to, but if you don't know the ballistics and how that bullet's going to travel at 1,000 yards, again, like you said, I hope everything goes right. That's probably the last place you want to be.
But that's not what I'm saying when I'm about to pull the trigger.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's the last thing.
Yeah. And so the point here, folks, is if you've got a rifle and it's, any of these calibers, right? Maybe the 6.5 Creed is all you've got. And maybe buying a second rifle isn't in the cards, right? We can still go elk hunting, right? We can do it. But you just have to understand the tool you're working with and then play accordingly, right? Get into that 250-yard shot, that 300-yard shot. Don't buy in too much to what you'll read because someone will always have shot one far. Hey, folks, I've been hunting out of Booner panel blinds by Maverick for years now. And one of my favorite things about the Booner blinds and all of Maverick's hunting blinds is how easy they are to set up. I recently set up 2 new blinds this last season, and I had both blinds set up by myself without any heavy equipment. You can carry each panel of your blind to the top of your platform and set it up by yourself in a single day. The best part about Maverick hunting blinds is that you get the all-weather comfort and scent control benefits of a hard-sided blind at a fraction of the cost. I mean, you can literally get 3 Maverick hunting blinds for the same price as some of the other options on the market, meaning you get triple the options when it comes to picking where you want to hunt so you can be in the right stand when that big buck walks out this fall. Click the link below and head over to maverickhunting.com and use the code WESTERNROOKIE, that's one word, WESTERNROOKIE, to save 10% on your next blind. Farther. And you never even know if they're true or if they're lying. So just stick to what you know, stick to what you're comfortable with. But the thought here today is like, Silas, you got the 30-06. Perfect rifle, for everything. And we can make that work. And so what are some of the things that, that you've been thinking about? And then after we talked about certain things that you're doing with your rifle for both the Wisconsin whitetail hunting and the Western hunting, like what's kind of your thought process on how you're going to address that? Are you going to do both rifles? Are you going to stick with the 30?
I think I'm definitely thinking of sticking with the 30-06. I think for me, it would come into kind of like you said, difference between monolithic bullets, all these different things that you can do to increase, your efficiency. I think that would probably be the way to go. like I said, I always shot the Remington Corlocks just because it's what I always shot, and I never thought about looking up to it. So I started doing some information, looking into a few things after you had responded to my comment, and
Yeah.
I really do think that would probably be the best thing, because otherwise, like you said, you're buying 2 boxes of ammo, you're sighting in 2 rifles. One of them I'm only going to use 9 days a year, and the other one I'm only going to use probably another 10 to 12 days a year. So I think sticking with the same rifle, feeling the same comfortability, but maybe instead of shooting 179 grain, figuring out, a better bullet with 145 to 155, 160 grain.
Yeah.
Might be the way to do it, but like I said, it's trying to find that happy medium between just shooting the same bullet and then just trying to figure out whatever's efficient for the hunt that you're going on.
Yeah.
You can shoot an antelope and leave a small dinner-sized plate on the other side of it, and it dumped it right there. But you might be like, well, there's not a front quarter on the other side because it's gone because I used a Lopua. But I guess that's where some people get into the idea of trophy hunting is just get it down right then. And if I see a big enough one, I'd be about it.
Yeah. And that's what I do. I use my 301 meg for antelope hunting. I've shot a doe antelope with it. I'm gonna do it again this fall. Hopefully, shoot a buck. And so I've got a couple of stories that we can dive into, but I want to talk about the bullets for an example, right? So you were shooting the 180 grain Corlocks, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And so I just pulled up 2 examples here. So number 1, I witnessed my niece shoot a 5x5 bull elk with a 7mm 08. And so for people that are like, well, what's that? Right? I've never heard of that. It's a nuanced caliber. It's been around for a while. It is, I would say the best way to describe it is halfway between a 6.5 Creedmoor and a 270 Win Mag. Right?
Yeah.
The bullet size, the bullet diameter is that 7mm, but it's a smaller casing with a little bit less energy, a lot less kick actually than the 270 Win Mag, right? And we're talking like little bits and pieces here, but it's, my brother bought it specifically for my niece. Like she's a female, she's smaller. She, like accuracy is always king. And if you get her a big 30 cal that barks and kicks, like you're going to flinch. Everyone does. And so I watched her shoot that with 140 grain TTSX or Barnes TSX, right? And so I just pulled up 2 options here. So that bullet out of the muzzle is going 2,820 feet per second as a 140 grain bullet, right? Well, with your 30-06 Springfield, you could go, and I pulled up a Nosler monolithic, they call it expansion tip, but that's their monolithic line. 168 grain 30-06 has a muzzle velocity of 2,800. So you got the same speed with about 28 grains more, which is 20% bigger bullet, right? Same speed, 20% bigger bullet. So then you just do, the mass is linear, right? E equals MC squared, right? You have the same speed. That's the squared part. So you have 20% more energy. You have 20% more momentum. That's how that works, right? And so you're like, well, that bullet is going to pound elk. It is going to just hammer them, right? And then you're like, well, 168 to 180. Well, the thing a lot of people I don't think realize is that 180 grain cord lead core bullet is going to lose 20, somewhere between 5 to 20%, depending on how fast it's going. The faster it's going, the more it'll frag. The bigger the bones it hits, the more it's going to frag. If you hit one at 100 yards and you hit the front leg, it's going to frag 100%. And so you're losing a lot of mass. Now, yes, that mass is going into the animal and it's transferring energy into the animal, which can be very lethal, lots of hemorrhage. But then, like you had your experience, you're picking pieces of lead out of the rear quarter. And when you're grinding it up, all of a sudden you hit the piece of lead and your grinder hops and you're like, oh, what was that? You're like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat that pound of hamburger. You know what I mean? And so that 168, that's going to lose 3%. That's typically the average for monolithics. So that 3% is 4.8 grains, 5.1 grains would probably be closer compared to 20% of 180, which is 36 grains. So that 180 is going to turn into a 144 as soon as you hit it. And I think people don't really realize that. They get concerned like, oh, that's a smaller bullet. I want a bigger bullet. I want a better bullet. It's like, well, the energy's there and it's not going to lose its mass. So it's going to perform better when it hits the target.
Yes, I agree. I think a lot of, just in the world, people think bigger is better.
Yeah.
Give me. I can get a 44-ounce drink from the gas station and pay the same price if I wanted a 12-ounce. I'm getting the 44, right? Instead of looking into all of that. And like you said, you can right off the bat, you're going to say, this is bigger. I'm going for elk. I need everything to hammer this elk as much as I can, as hard as I can. Instead of focusing on the thought of, am I efficient with this rifle? Am I going to hit the front shoulder and just watch it explode and not do anything? The elk is just going to run off with a little blood spot, I think that's a really big thing to focus on, and that's probably my next step is kind of doing some ballistics, not testing so much as just looking into it and seeing what other people have to say.
Seeing what the options are. And one of the things that I think a lot of people might ask themselves, they might have the same gun as you or I, and they're like, yeah, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to whitetail hunt with my 30-06, maybe in Wisconsin, maybe not. And then I'm going to go elk hunting. Do I need 2 different bullets? And so, we've kind of decided, I think you can get by with almost everything in the lower 48 if you've got that 6.5 Creedmoor, which is like a 255 caliber, if my math is right, and bigger, right? Like if you're at, a 243, I think is a little bit light for elk, personally. Some first person's going to write in and be like, I shot a 243, I shot a big bull at 243 with 1,000 yards. And it's like, well, okay. I'm not going to advise people to do that. You did it. Good for you. I'm happy for you, but I'm not going to give people that advice. 243, great deer round, great antelope round. I just don't think it's there for elk. So I think 6.5 is basically the next common jump up. And above that, I think you can basically do everything in North America. You might be hunting elk at 300 yards instead of 500 yards, which 500 is a long shot anyway. So don't feel bad about that. Like most people in most situations can get inside 300 yards of an elk.
I would agree. The longest kill I ever had was 534 yards, I believe it was. And I was aiming for the lead cow, kind of just trotting, a whole herd of like 15, 20 of them. And I shot once and I saw the vapor trail because it was so early in the morning. I saw it hit the dirt. So I aimed a little higher the next one and I saw it go right under her nose. I'm like, so I aimed just a little bit higher, boom, and I see something tumble. I'm like, heck yeah. And get over there. And I had shot, it was still a big calf, probably a 1-year-old calf, but she had just come out from the front of her mom and it went right under the chin again of the big lead cow and just hit her right in the ear. It was definitely a lucky shot, right? But holy smokes, like you said, 500 yards is a long ways away. And it was young enough to just keep trying. I think now I probably wouldn't, but it works.
We've all been there. It's 500 is it's a long ways, folks. Like you look at it on paper and you see so many forum people post about how they shot at 500. And they say you need to practice to 500 because shots are farther in the West, and all of that can be true. I think practicing at 500 is wonderful, but that is not the average Western shot.
No.
So I just want people to, I would say in the threes. In the threes is average. 2s and 3s is typically where your shots are going to be. But when you're good at 5, that 250, like we talked about earlier, that's when you're like, I know this thing is dead because I can kill this at 500 yards and he's at 247.
Yeah,
right?
I would agree.
Yeah, so you can hunt the same caliber. You don't need to buy a new rifle. Now let's talk about the bullets. Do you need 2 different bullets? I think if you're like deer elk, my personal opinion is no. And like this one that I pulled up, this Nosler, and we have no affiliation with Nosler. I just love their story, and it's a family-owned brand. The 168, man, I'd love that for whitetails. I've been becoming a fan of lighter and faster bullets for deer.
Okay.
And I think I mentioned that to you as well. I've done a lot of research. I've shot a lot of them. I've shot them with different things. I've shot them with everything from my bow, my shotgun, a muzzle loader, rifles. I feel like the faster your bullet is going, and I think it's a relationship between like speed, size, and the size of the animal, right? But I think when you start getting faster and faster and faster bullets that are still solid bullets, there's a better chance that that animal is just going to buckle and fall. And I'm talking research, like reading Teddy Roosevelt memoirs of his hunting experiences at the Elkhorn Ranch in western North Dakota, shooting mule deer, and just commenting like, we had 12 people in camp, and the people with the fastest bullets, their bucks dropped on the spot. The people with the slower bullets, they had to track theirs on a horse. And then he, going into philosophy on, I feel as a hunter, if you can do anything you can to end that moment as fast as possible, like that's what I want to strive for. And so I'm, and he's talking about how he's switching up to doing like a lightweight 270, right? A light bullet 270, get that speed and velocity. And then where I'm going with, like, I think it correlates to like bullet size and speed to the animal. When I shot my antelope, and it's common, most antelope just buckle and drop when you shoot them with almost anything.
Yeah.
And that's because they're a smaller animal. They're a lighter weight animal. There's a lot of things going on there. And I've shot elk with my 300 Win, and I've shot antelope with my 300 Win. The antelope just buckle and drop like you would expect. Big rifle, very fast bullet. I was shooting a monolithic, a lighter weight monolithic. The elk I shoot, they eat them. And I'm like, so it's just, you can't really say like, oh, I'm just going to go faster and drop an elk in a track. Sometimes they do. But I think if you were shooting like a 375 caliber with a 4,000 feet per second bullet, that elk probably would drop in his tracks too. But it's just a bigger, harder animal. Like, you're not going to maybe see the same thing. But with deer, I think you can influence it. I think you can tip the scales. I think that's like the antelope, they're always going to drop. Elk hardly ever going to drop. But the deer, I think depending on what you build, you can kind of influence it. If you go with like for the 30-06, for example, if your 200 grain bullets, they're probably going 2,500 feet per second.
So I think that's probably what it looked like on the box.
Yeah, which you're probably not even going to get, and like no one gets box speeds typically unless you have like a super long barrel. If you went from that to maybe even like a 150 grain, and you're getting close to 3,000 feet per second, I think that is starting to be a place where you might see a difference. Like you might see 3 out of 4 bucks drop in their tracks instead of 0 out of 4 bucks. Right.
True. Yeah. That's a lot better than the 28 that you're getting with just the core locked. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like 180 grains versus 155. If you're getting more speed, like you said, I think that's what does it. When I was growing up, my dad always shot a 7 mag, but he had a buddy that had a 308, a 300 rum. And every time his buddy shot something, especially deer, I didn't see him take more than 5 steps before it was game over. And it almost seemed like no matter where he hit him, I think it was just that initial shock was just like, oh, I got to sit down right here. I don't want to go any farther.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that'll say it's like it's the ballistic shock wave that goes through them, and it like the things that I've read they're all hypothesizing. Some of this stuff was in the 1800s.
Yeah.
But they're hypothesizing that it's like a central nervous system shock wave that happens fast enough. It kind of like stuns them and they fall. And then the second key is like, that doesn't kill them. Your well-placed shot kills them. Mm-hmm. But the fact that they were stunned for 15, 20 seconds means they didn't run 200 yards.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. And so, yeah, I think with a lot of calibers, one solid bullet can be your do-all bullet. Now, if I had a 6.5 Creedmoor, like my wife's gun, I actually bought her antelope hunting ammo today, right?
Yeah.
I bought antelope ammo for that. I bought 120 grain monolithic. We're going to shoot faster. It's going to kick less. It's a starter bullet too. Like, she just got this rifle. We're sighting it in this weekend. So I'm not thinking like an elk hunt that's 3-4 years away yet. We can pick a different bullet. If I'm on the lighter side of calibers, I'm probably, and I want one bullet to do it all, because I like a lot of things about just having one bullet. I know it works. I don't have to resight in. I don't have to update my dope charts. The last thing you want to do is go out west and your dope chart's the wrong dope chart for a different load, or your ammo was not what you thought. This episode is brought to you by Steelhead Outdoors. From the moment I first saw a Steelhead Outdoor safe, I knew I was going to order one. The ability to customize the color, the configuration, and most importantly, the ability to move and assemble my safe panel by panel makes Steelhead Outdoors the clear winner when it comes to gun safes. And if you haven't ordered a Steelhead Outdoor gun safe yet, you can still benefit from their innovation and creativity because the guys over at Steelhead have designed some awesome accessories. Their case keeper allows you to hang all of your hunting caps and gun cases off the side of your safe, and it keeps your hunting room looking clean and organized. Or my favorite is the bow keeper that lets me hang my bow off the side of my safe so me and my wife can walk into our safe room, hang up our bows after shooting in the backyard, and not have to worry about the hassle of putting our bows back in the case every time. Both the bow keeper and case keeper are magnetic and work with any safe, which means you can use them now with your current safe, and when the time comes to order your Steelhead Outdoors gun safe, you'll already have all the accessories you need. Head over to steelheadoutdoors.com to order your bow keeper and case keeper today. I would probably go up. I'd go up heavier. I'd do like the 143s, the 140s instead of the 120s. Same with the 7mm08. But if you're into the 270s or the 30s, like I think you can kind of like this 168. I think you can do everything with it. I don't think you need. I think when you're in that sweet spot in some of these calibers, I would go for it. I mean, what's the, if you're gonna go antelope hunting, do a double lung shot. Get into 200 yards and do a double lung shot. You're not gonna have any wasted meat.
Yeah, and that animal's probably going to go down. If it doesn't fall right there, it's going to run in a 50-yard circle and then fall,
So I built the reason my gun is kind of like not what most people hunt out west with is because I wanted to track my shots. I wanted to be able to keep my scope field of view on the animal when it kicks. And so it's a very heavy rifle. And I have a monster muzzle brake on the end of it that I'd actually really like to switch out to a suppressor. But the thought is I can get back on target faster and track my shots, right? While this doe antelope was at 100 yards, I snuck up, perfect shot, safety off, laying down prone, right, shoot. I thought I missed because all the antelope are running away, and I was back on target so fast I didn't see it drop. But that little bit at 100 yards that it does take me to get back on track, that antelope was already on the ground, and the grass was just tall enough it took me a split second to find it. I mean, like you said, just like a sack of potatoes, which is great. And I do believe it was dead the moment it hit the ground somehow because it did not twitch or move again. It didn't kick. It didn't move. And when I got up to it, so this was a 180 grain monolithic out of a 300 Win Mag at 100 yards, right? Like this is the definition of overkill for an antelope. I got up to that thing and I was worried. I'm like, this, I don't know how this is going to go. I'm worried I'm going to waste a bunch of meat. First time I've done this, walked up to the antelope and the entry hole and the exit hole were like almost the same size.
Wow.
And the meat loss on the backside when I was butchering this animal, I would say was like a baseball sized like hemorrhage, like where you get that bloody hemorrhaged tissue. No matter what, even if you shoot a deer with a bow, like you still have a little bit. You're like, I'm gonna cut that stuff out.
Yeah, there's the trauma channel somewhat,
Yeah, the trauma channel, sure. Yeah, you have that soft tissue damage of all the tissue like going out and in, and all the capillaries rip. And you get that no matter what you shoot an animal with. Bows, obviously, lesser to degree, but shotguns, muzzleloaders, rifles, you get that no matter what.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that wasn't bad at all. And I think personally what happened was that bullet has such a big mass and it's going so fast, it didn't even have time to expand. Such a soft, small target. It probably just punched right through and was like quarter expanded. And I didn't hit any major bones and it didn't cause a lot of damage. And I'm like, I'm not going to get all bent out of shape spending another $1,500 on an antelope rifle. I'm just going to use this and take more time, take better shots, fully broadside, aim for a double lung and not, waste maybe a pound of meat. So I was like, that's when the moment I realized, like, I think a lot of people blow it out of proportion on like, you need an antelope gun to antelope hunt. You need to have a different bullet, and you need, you can't shoot an antelope with a 30 caliber. You'll waste all the meat. That was not my experience, folks. If you did two shoulders, you're gonna waste half an antelope. But that was not my experience.
True. Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think a lot of people, especially when it comes to antelope hunting with a rifle and a bow, really, you start to extend your distance that you're comfortable shooting because you've already stocked 4 or 5 times, and every one of them is blown out of the country. So you're like, all right, well, 300 yards was too close, so let's try to shoot at 400 yards. And even if you have the right rifle, you hit them in the ass twice, and then once in the neck to drop them. It's like there's your meat loss right there, right? So
Yeah.
I'll take, like you said, that baseball-sized, trauma channel. It's like, I'll take that. And, you're saving a little more meat with a better shot, and a proper bullet. But, I don't know. I think that's just where it goes to. It's just making a good shot as it is. They're both, I tell a lot of people, I'm like, our firepower and the bullets that we have now and the rifles that we have now are much better than probably what Teddy was shooting back in the day, and even our ancestors way before us used. So it's like any bullet, in a sense would seem like it would do the job, right? But you can't just graze their back and be like, oh, that did it. You're gonna have to hit it perfect.
Right. And I think that's a big part of like picking one rifle and one bullet. Like you can spend so much more time shooting that rifle and getting more comfortable with one gun and how it operates. Unless you get every gun in the same platform, right? Which you could do. I mean, there's a lot of people, a lot of target rifle guys, long distance guys will build their long distance, usually a 308, sometimes a 300 PRC, 6.5 Creed. These are all long distance rifles. And then they'll get the exact same rifle in a 22 long rifle that doesn't kick at all. And it's their practice gun. So they shoot that over and over and over again, and they train themselves not to flinch. So then when they shoot the real one, they don't flinch.
True.
And they're all, 42 pound, not 42 pound rifles. They're all heavy chassis rifles anyway. And none of those calibers kick that much. So that's how they do it. And so there's some truth to that. But I think just getting familiar with one gun, how it operates, one load. I'm not changing my sights. I'm not changing my scope for every season. And what's going to happen? You go out deer. So for you, if you're doing a rifle hunt, typically that's going to be like October, November for elk.
Yep.
And then Wisconsin's firearm season is like Thanksgiving week, right? So
Yep.
if you're doing like second, third rifle in Colorado, and then you're coming home and you have 4 days to switch your ammo out and re-sight in, and it's Thanksgiving and it's cold and you got to get back to work and you're not going to do it. And if you do it, you're not going to spend the time you should. And so then is that as accurate as you can be, or would you be better off just picking one bullet for everything? And that's just the question I ask myself. And I'm like, I know myself good enough to know I'm not going to spend the time it truly takes to re-sight in a rifle. And so I just stick with one bullet.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. And I guess my question for you is, are you still using, obviously I think you use the same rifle, but are you using the same bullet that you use, say, on your 2019 elk hunt to this day? Or have you kind of switched that up a little bit through shooting different elk? Like I know in Colorado you got a chance, they gave you points, so like same rifle, same bullet, or has that changed?
So that's a great question. In 2019, I was still borrowing rifles.
Okay.
So I borrowed a 300 Winchester short mag.
Okay.
From my dad. Actually, I borrowed my dad's rifle to shoot that one. And I was shooting a 200 grain ELDX. And I would have stuck with it except for two things. I realized 200 grains is overkill. Like it kicked like a mule.
It's a cannon.
And it was a very light Tika T3 light rifle. Like it was a small rifle.
Got it.
I'm like, this isn't fun, right? Like I don't need to be the toughest, burliest man out there. People know I'm not already. So why pretend, right? Like why beat myself up when I'm alone to say I'm cool?
Sure.
So that was number one. Number two, I bought my own rifle, and I went back and forth, 300 wing or 300 short mag. Picked the 300 wing, so I had to pick a different bullet anyway. And then the same thing, the lead got me. Finally, it was like, I think I want a monolithic.
Oh.
I was on that same train. I want a big heavy bullet, not getting down anything in North America. And then I did some of the research. I'm like, this monolithic's going to do the same thing. Like if I could kill a moose with a 200 grain, I'm going to kill this moose with a 180 grain copper.
Definitely. Yeah.
And so I switched. Since then, I have shot the same bullet this whole time. And another nice thing is like, I'm not just a recreational shooter. Like I just don't go burn 500 rounds a summer. That's super expensive when you're buying $100 a box ammo.
It is.
And so the nice thing is like, I'm getting ready for this antelope hunt. I have the ammo I need to practice a little bit this summer, make sure everything's good, and then go on the hunt. I don't need to buy any ammo. Like that's one nice thing as well. But like, just find something that works and stick with it. That's my, yeah.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. I enjoy shooting the 30-06, but like I said, I just figured it was time to kind of dial into, if I really want to be effective and I really want to hunt Wyoming, Montana, New Mexico, if I ever get it, Wisconsin, kind of venture out to some of these other states to do more species. It'd be nice to just shoot the same bullet every time and know the performance of it. Like my brother-in-law, his second deer was a 163-inch mule deer. He'd been shooting all summer, getting ready for his second rifle hunt. He's got his dope chart onto the cheek stock, and he's ready to go. And this thing's standing there 250, and I'm ranging it, like telling him 250. He's not shooting. I look over, and I'm like, Dylan, you gonna shoot? He's like, do I use the second dot on my scope? Is that too? And I'm like, I have never looked through your scope, so I just told him yes. I said yeah. So he shoots and dumps it, and he's like, I don't know why I asked you. I was like, me either. Like, I think the other thing that people have to understand, like when you go out west and you're shooting whitetails, like you get jacked up. But you see an elk, a big mule deer, and it's like every solid thought that you had that was going to happen just absolutely goes out the window, and you lose it, right? And so that's the other side of it is you don't want to switch up a bullet and then be like, so what's my effective range with this one? Like now that I'm hunting whitetails and it's standing out there 200 yards, like I was shooting 179 grain, now I got 155. How's it going to perform? What's it going to do? But they're already in the freeze, And
everyone, I'm a strong proponent of this. If you have a scope that dials or a scope that doesn't, you need to memorize 2 data points, right? You're going to sight your bullet in for a 0 at 200 yards. Everyone does.
Yeah.
I strongly encourage it. All the load data is meant for that. The rifle ammo box is going to be meant for that. Strongly, unless you're like super nuanced, like maybe you only hunt Wisconsin whitetails and you'll never have a 200-yard shot. Okay, then I could see maybe sight it in for a 100-yard 0. But if you're for the West, you're going to sight it in for a 200-yard 0, and you don't need to worry about anything under 200 yards. Just put the crosshairs where you want the bullet to go. Worst case, you're going to be off by 1.5 inches on an elk. It's not going to matter. And if you're 50 yards away from an antelope, you're not going to matter either. Just put the crosshairs halfway up and down behind the front shoulder and kill it.
Yeah.
So you need to remember 2 numbers. You need to remember your 300-yard and you need to remember your 400-yard. If it's farther than 400 yards, you don't need to have it memorized because you should be taking the time to make sure it's a calm shot. All the variables are in place. You know the wind, the animal's not moving. There's no such thing as rushing a 500-yard shot.
True.
Right?
Yeah.
There's no such thing as, oh, what's my holdover? What's my holdover? It's 500 yards. You can't do that. If it's 500 yards and you are a 500-yard shooter, you are getting prone. You're adjusting your stance like 5 times. You're dry firing. This animal is bedded. It's not going anywhere. There's a reason you're at 500 because you can't get any closer without getting busted. You have time to check your dope chart. 300, maybe not. Maybe you do have to take a faster 300-yard shot, and then you got to know. So, for example, I know my dope is 358. 300 yards, I have to dial for a 3 MOA. 400 yards, I have to dial for a 5 MOA. 800 or 500 yards, I have to dial for an 8 MOA. I actually do memorize the 5, but I'm also a lunatic that lives off numbers. So, but yeah, and so like if you don't have a dial, you got to know 300 yards is this one, 400 yards is that one. After that, I mean, if you don't have a dial and you're trying to shoot 500 yards, I was like, you might want to rethink this strategy. Like you do not want to be holding off your animal.
For sure. Like I said, I mean, that 534-yard shot that I made, 15 years old, they were standing at 200, and then I just tried to get closer for some reason, so I'm just out there slinging lead. I hadn't shot those bullets that I got last year. I hadn't shot them past like 300 yards. And deer tag last year, a mule deer here in Colorado, and I think it was like 402. And I just didn't shoot. And everybody's like, why not? like you shot at something at 500. It's like, well, I know, like you said, I know a little bit more now to say I'd rather miss that opportunity than to shoot and miss altogether or to wound it. And now I'm spending the rest of the night by myself trying to find a freaking deer in this burn.
I
probably not gonna,
have I have the same heartbreaking story last year. I had a 160 to 165 caliber whitetail on camera that I had known about for 2 years. And he was like, when I say on camera, he was 20 yards from my blind on a mock scrape tree that I built for archery season, but it's now firearm season. The night, like all off and on all week, but the night before, like it's Friday night of gun season, right? Second weekend's coming up. 9 o'clock at night, he hits that scrape tree. I'm on my way back to the family farm to hunt the weekend. I'm like, it is on. He's on our property. He's alive. He survived opening weekend. Tomorrow morning, it's going to happen. I pull into the farm. He is standing in the parking lot of where we park.
Oh, no.
And so I'm like, shit. Back out. I don't know if I've told this story on the pod. I really don't.
I haven't heard it.
So I'm like, I'm going to get up I'm going to be in my stand 90 minutes before first shooting. Like, this buck is on our farm. I'm getting in it so ungodly early that there's not a chance I wreck this, right? I'm not going to bump him on the way in. Sure enough, I turn the corner off the road, the headlights swing. He is standing where I park my truck. And so I'm like, shit. Back out, drive all the way around the farm to somewhere I've never parked, and walk in from the back, which now I'm like, well, at least I know where he is. And he was tending a doe. He was locked on her. He didn't care about me at all. I backed out real quick. I took enough for like a 4-second Snapchat video, and then I backed out. And I call in, and now my heart's jacked. Like, he is here. Like, did I bump him? Did I move him? What's going on? Sun comes up. I'm locked on. I whitetail hunt with a spotter in my stand because this farm is like a big open CRP. I can see like 10 square miles around our farm. And so I'm locked over there just scanning. Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? It took me about like 9 o'clock before I finally see him. He must have been bedded down or something. Stood up, same parking lot where I was going to park my truck. Starts milling around, hits this creek bed, and turns and follows this creek bed down. I'm like, oh, he's coming right to us. All he has to do is cross this creek and come either check one of 2 food plots I'm hunting or my scrape tree that he has been on all the time. Like, he's probably doing his straight route. He's going to walk underneath my stand, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he walks down that thing, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, shoot, he's not walking. He's not going to cross it. He's on the wrong side. He's not crossing. So now I'm like, burp, burp, trying to grunt at him. I do a little bit of shaking with the antlers. He stops and stares at me 201 yards. And it's a shotgun zone.
Oh, my goodness.
And we have some of the world's most accurate shotguns. I mean, I can touch slugs at 200 yards.
Oh, wow.
On a bench rest. The problem is the energy drops off, and 150 is my absolute max, right? And so I've never done the dope chart to 200 to know what the drop is. And I mean, rifles and shotguns are drastically different. Like, my gun drops 8 inches from 100 to 150. Right. So from 150 to 200 is like, I don't know, 17 inches, 24 inches. I was like, for 2 hours, I had that buck at 201 yards staring at me. I filled up my iPhone full of video filming him through my spotting scope. And I just, like you, I'm like, I've probably done, if I was 16, I probably would have been sending lead.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah,
who wouldn't? That's the tough thing, and I think that's the side of hunting that people that don't do it, they think we're just going out there and shooting at anything and everything that walks and moves. And it's like, we do have a heart. We do want those animals to suffer the least amount as possible. When you're 15, 16, you're just like, I need to shoot something. All my friends are going to think this is crazy, especially when it's that big.
This was the biggest buck I've ever seen hunting.
Wow. Okay, yeah. Well,
mainframe 10-pointer. And so I pass him. He beds down 2 hours, and I can see him the whole time he's bedded down. I can see the top of his antlers and his head in the CRP.
Yeah.
And should I spot and stalk him? Should I not? We've done it once successfully. I don't know. I think he's going to stand. I still think he's going to stand up and come this way. Like, this is the mock scrape. These are the food plots. All the does are on my side of the river. Sure enough, he stands up, walks the other way across a mile-long alfalfa field. And then me and my buddy hunt the two I'm really good friends with the neighbor.
Okay.
We saw him a couple of other times throughout the weekend. Last day of the season, he made it through. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to get a muzzleloader season. Like, opening day of muzzleloader season, the neighbor shot him. Kid shot him.
And he was, did you go see him?
I don't know them.
Oh, okay.
Not the neighbor kid, the next neighbor down.
Yeah.
The one that we don't necessarily like because he shoots the big one that we're all tracking every year.
Yeah.
His property just lines up perfectly. And so, bummer. But in other news, I have a 300-yard muzzleloader in transit to my house right now. So.
Oh, nice.
We're done hunting with 150-yard shotguns at that farm. We're switching to 300-yard muzzleloaders.
Yeah, see, I saw a few videos. I think Muley Freak, they do a lot of, like, I think it was 500 yards if they shot these muzzleloaders and kill a deer.
Yeah, but they're using custom arrowhead muzzleloaders.
True. Yeah. So it's like it is possible, right? But like coming from Colorado, it's open sights. 50.
Yeah, and
50 cal.
open sight 50 cals, and all. The longer the range, typically the 40 is the calibers they're using, and then mine's going to be a 45 because they don't have the 40s in stock right now, and so I might actually sell it next year and get a 40 just to get even more accurate long range. But so heartbreaking story. It's the second year in a row. 1 year I was bow hunting, and the second biggest buck I've ever seen from the stand was at like 60 yards, and luckily that story ended up nice. My niece got him with a shotgun. So, yeah, we chased him for 3 years, 160-inch mainframe 8 with some junk. Yeah, super cool to be able to see that.
Whitetails are always, like, growing up in Colorado, I remember I'd always get, like, the Buckmasters videos. I'd watch Jackie Bushman. I'd watch all these whitetail hunters, because I didn't think Colorado had whitetails. And then my dad, I just like these magazines and these videos because we don't have whitetails. And he's like, yeah, we do. It's just a lot tougher out east in Colorado where the majority of whitetails are. It's kind of like the Midwest. Everybody
it's all private
property. So, like, even if there is a strip of public, there's enough to put one person on it shooting about 100 yards,
Yeah.
So,
it's super cool. One more question I did want to catch you before we leave because I know we're coming up on an hour. So we had also talked about the optics, because the way you hunt with this 30 cal, this 30-06 that you got, drastically different hunting styles. Short range Wisconsin, sometimes faster shots, doing deer drives. And so we talked about optics a little bit. What are your thoughts now on what you're going to do with your optics for this one platform does all rifle?
I started thinking about it after you brought it up because I do have the access to get to the 270 as well. I jumped around kind of doing almost what would be like the over-under sight. Like you said, you can still get to the rails, but you can also look through the scope if you have to. I thought doing that for the 270, but I'm kind of like, you could kind of benefit from that in Colorado as well. I'm more of a like a spot and stock, so to speak, guy. I'll just still hunt most everything. And I think, totally off topic, but what helps Midwest hunters, coming out west hunting is you guys can sit in stands all day, right? And I sit a meadow for 2 hours and I just feel like ripping my hair out, so I get up and I walk. And I can't tell you how many times I've busted something, and I'm on 4 power because when I was looking through the meadow, I needed it. And now this thing's running away at 60 yards, and I can't tell the difference between, the back, the front, a tree, or whatever, So I do think that it would be valuable to maybe create like a little bit of a hybrid gun that has the ability to look under the rail. Like last year when I hunted Wisconsin, doe jumps up in front of me, probably 20 yards. And, I don't pull up on her, but I kind of look. And somebody's like, hey, you should pay attention. There might be a buck. And he doesn't get the BU in buck out before this probably 135, maybe 140-inch buck jumps up. And I pull up the scope, and I can't see jack squat. Dude next to me on the line just turns his gun sideways and shoots twice, shooting it sideways. I'm like, what the hell was that? And he's like, oh yeah, you just turn it sideways and look down the barrel when they're that close. And I've never heard of that, So I'm trying to find it in the scope, and that's apparently everybody told me that was the wrong way to go. They're like, no, just look down the side of it, or just like look right along the side of your scope at them. And it was probably 25 yards, but if you've done enough deer drives or done a few, it's like the dude next to you to the left and the right aren't that far. So as you start thinking about swinging, it's like I had 5 seconds, then there's a dude with orange, and then the deer gets behind us, and I got another 10 seconds before it just turns into nothing but brush, And so that was kind of the instance that made me say, what do I need to do? Do I need a different gun? Like some people are taking shotguns because they're going to be pushing a drive, and then you say, hey, you're going to be posting this one, and they grab the rifle out of the truck with the scope. So I'm like, is that my option? Is that what I should be doing? I don't know. You drive all those miles to get to Wisconsin. It's like you kind of want to shoot something, especially when to me, biggest whitetail I'd ever seen jumps out in front of you. 20 yards, I should have been able to hit him once,
Yeah.
But
yeah, so the topic was like, we talked about there's, short range tactical scopes. You could do like a 1-6 or a 2-10. But then if that's what you're going to bring out west, or that's what you're going to hunt with out west, you're like, well, that's not, 1-6 isn't much.
Yeah.
Right. And so then do I like get a 3x9, 4x12, 4x16 and put up with it whitetail hunting, but 4 power on a 20-yard shot? You're just looking at brown. You have no idea front shoulder, back shoulder. Is it the deer's? It's too tight. And then I was like, well, there's, in the old days, they used to have these scope mounts with the holes drilled out. And so you could, either go up through your scope, or you could look under your scope and see your iron sight at the end. Usually they only had the one on the barrel. And I'm like, you could probably do that and then leave your 4x16 or whatever you use out west and have the best of both worlds, which I think is kind of the tilt sideways. And I did know about that for ARs. A lot of like, SEAL team movies you watch, and they've got like a big optic on the front and then like a red dot on the side, and they just tilt it. And I'm like, well, I thought about that. I'm like, he's not going to have a 45-degree pick rail on his 30-06. So he's not going to be able to put a red dot at 45 degrees. But I didn't think like, oh yeah, just like don't aim, or not like shotgun hunt, like, not aim, shoot, or follow through. But yeah, so there's another option for someone that's in the same position, like whitetail short range, Western long range. I don't want to buy 2 scopes. Like that's almost as much as 2 rifles. So how do I make it work with one? And I think that's probably the sweet spot. Is that stylus scope ring.
Yeah, I would agree. And like I said, it's 5 days of sitting in a stand from sun up to sundown. And so I want the scope. Kind of like you said, if you're making a 500-yard shot, that animal's, for the most part, just standing there, bedded, doing something, feeding in the same meadow. It kind of seems that way for whitetails. When I'm in the stand and they come in, as long as you don't drop your little Debbies or anything, you should be fine, right?
Yeah.
But that's like one day I'm in the stand, the next morning I could get picked up to go do deer drives, and I'm looking at my rifle and everybody else is like, dude, that's a cannon. Like, got this big old elk scope on it, but it works when they're standing there, but when they're at 20 yards, it's World War III, so yeah, it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough. Well, Silas, I'm super happy that you wrote in, that we got to have a chance to have this podcast and talk about all these questions, because I do think they're probably relatable to more people than just you and I. And so I'm glad we could bring this conversation to the podcast. But man, it's been a great time talking to you, talking about hunting, whitetails, elk, antelope, mule deer, everything in between. Man, I appreciate you being here.
Definitely. I appreciate the opportunity. Long-time follower, long-time listener. I was excited to get on, and happy about it.
Awesome. This is what happens when you write in, folks. Not every time, but sometimes you get your chance to be a guest on the podcast. So write in, ask more questions. We love to do it. Thanks again for being here, Silas, and thank you for listening, folks.